I'm going to move on into the study of Hayom Yom. Today's date is the 8th day of Nisan, and Hayom Yom tells us as follows, teaching from the Rebbe for today. Every soul has its particular avoda, its divine service, in the areas of intellect and emotions. We all have a custom prescription of what our soul is supposed to achieve in this world, intellectually and emotionally, in accordance with that soul's nature and character. It is written in Psalms 119, "From my foes have you given me my wisdom. I've learned from my enemies. From the evil tendencies the one detects in his natural traits, he can become wise and know how to handle the correction of these traits and how to subordinate his powers in the service of God." This is profound. King David was talking about, he was saying, "From my foes have you given me wisdom." But the deeper meaning of this statement of King David incorporated into the Torah is prophetic, is that he's saying, if you want to know what your mission is in this world, you can learn it from your enemies. You see, while we might not be conscious of the purpose of our soul's descent into this world specifically, while you might not know the exact reason, the tikkun means a correction, why my soul needed to reincarnate and be born back into this world. None of us are here for the first time. We've all been here before in previous lifetimes. Why our soul needed to come back, what tikkun, what perfection, what correction we needed to do in this world. None of us are conscious of that. But you know who does know that? Our animal soul knows. Our animal soul is godly. And our animal soul knows what is our purpose in this world. And that's why our animal soul will fight us where it's important. So for example, if your mission in this world is to give charity, let's say in a previous lifetime you were a miserable miser. You're a good guy, good person, but you just didn't give charity to anybody. And your soul needed to be reincarnated back into this world in order to give charity. Your animal soul will know that, and therefore will do everything in its power to stop you from giving charity. It won't care if you study Torah, it won't care if you go to shul, it won't care if you, mezuzahs, tefillin, kosher, Shabbos candles, no problem. But when it comes to charity, he's going to make you crazy. And therefore you'll notice if it's very, very difficult for you to give charity, that's not a sign for you not to give charity. It's a sign that this is something so incredibly important. This is something you should be focusing on. Whatever is hard for you, that's your mission in this world. Another person might have been very charitable in a previous lifetime, but couldn't get along with his brother. And therefore they needed to come back to this world. Both of them needed to reincarnate so they get along with each other. If you're finding it very difficult to get along with that person, maybe that's your mission in this world. And that's what King David is telling us over here. From my enemies you have given me power, given me wisdom. From the evil tendencies one detects in his natural traits, he can become wise and know how to handle the correction of these traits. That's your specific mission in this world. How amazing is that? It's like a window into our soul that you right now can think about for a moment. Think about what is your challenge? What is difficult for you? And what's difficult for you is different to what's difficult for me. And if you think about that for a moment, now you know why you've been put into this world. So let's be counterintuitive. How to subordinate his powers in the service of God. Let's be counterintuitive. Let's have the courage to stand back and to redefine our paradigm. Instead of saying, if something is difficult, therefore I'm going to do something else. Say, if something is difficult, therefore it's important. I hear people tell me, Rabbi, if I wasn't meant to steal, then why did God allow the cash register to be left open? If I wasn't meant to be with that woman, then why would God make me so excited about her? If I wasn't meant to, if I was meant to walk to shul on Shabbos, then why didn't God give me wings? And the reason is because God wants you to do it on your own accord. He wants you to overcome the problem. Your evil inclination knows that it's hard for you. Knows that it's important for you, and that's why he makes it hard for you. If something's not important for you, the evil inclination doesn't make it difficult. Go for it, no problem. But when something is important for you, that's when the evil inclination steps in and says, no. The buck stops here. This we won't allow, and that's where you find challenge. So wherever you find the challenge, that's when you know this is your opportunity for growth. That's your sign. Okay. Good. Now we're going to carry on with the study of Talmud. We're going to do a little bit of study of Talmud. We're on page in the Ein Yaakov book. If you have this book from Art Scroll Masorah Publications, we are studying Talmud in the middle of page 81. We're learning about the laws of a shul and how you're supposed to behave in a shul. We said that you're not. Yesterday we learned that if you violate the rabbinic law, then you could get killed. That's what Elijah did when he found the guy that was violating rabbinic law. He killed him. So that was pretty intense. And if Elijah the prophet did that, man, let me tell you, you may want to be careful of not messing around with rabbinic law. Let's keep on going. The verse mentioned by the Talmud, the wicked walk on all sides, continues the verse, krum zulus to people. It's an interesting verse. It's difficult to know how to translate that verse. The wicked walk on all sides, krum zulus to people. Let's try to understand what that means. A rabbinic student asked Rabbi Beivai bar Abaye, and some say that Rav Beivai asked Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, what is the meaning of this phrase? Good morning, Edmire. What is the meaning of the phrase krum zulus to people? What does that even mean? I mean, what language is that? He replied to him, there are things that stand at the height of the world. Rum is the height, such as prayer, which reaches the highest levels. Yet people treat these things with disrespect as zulus. So he explained krum zulus to mean that which is at the highest levels, the most important things, people disrespect zulus. Interesting. That actually ties in perfectly with what we just learned in the Hayom Yom, which is that our mission in this world is what is most difficult for us. So the things that people disrespect, that's what is the most important things in this world. It ties in perfectly with today's teaching of Hayom Yom. This is the reference to the wicked person mentioned at the beginning of the verse who prays facing away from the congregation. By doing so, he shows a lack of respect for prayer. So let's talk about this a moment. What does this mean? That what does it mean that prayer is at the height of the world? Just before we do that, I want to go just a little bit further in the Talmud to finish this paragraph before we go deeper for a deeper explanation. A different exposition of the same verse, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar both say, when a person becomes dependent on others, such as when he must borrow money, the color of his face changes like that of a krum. A krum is something which changes colors, as the Talmud is going to explain. As it says, krum zulus livnei adam, krum zulus to people. The verse means like a krum is one degraded. Zulus is degraded. So his color changes like a krum as he's degraded by becoming dependent on other people. The commentaries explain the wicked lender who walks near the borrower to embarrass him by reminding him of the debt he is currently unable to pay, makes his face change color because of his degradation. You know, if somebody owes you money and you know they can't pay you, you're not supposed to walk by them and embarrass them. You're actually supposed to avoid them if you know they can't afford to pay you back. So the wicked lender is the one that rubs it in the face of the borrower, reminding him all the time at every opportunity that he can't afford to pay him back, and that makes his face change color. So that's the meaning of what the Psalms are saying, that when you are degraded because you have to be dependent on other people, then your face changes color. The Gemara explains what is a krum. When Rav Dimi came to Babylonia from Israel, he said there's a certain bird found in the cities by the sea that is called a krum. And when the sun shines in it, it changes to various colors. Similarly, when a person has to rely on others for his needs, his face changes colors out of embarrassment. I wonder what that bird is. Interesting. I mean, I know we have birds here in Palm Beach that they're like when the sun shines on them, it's like a blue. It's like maybe the raven. I think it looks black, but when the sun shines on it, it looks like a beautiful blue. I don't know. Maybe it's that kind of a bird. I don't know. Who knows? In any event, let's go deeper and try to understand what is it about prayer. What's so important about prayer that is at the height of the world? That we said krum zulus, according to our first interpretation, we explained it to mean that which is at the height of the world, that's what is ridiculed, what is despised or disrespected by bnei adam, by people. So the verse would mean the wicked walk on all sides. The most important things they degrade. That's what the verse would be saying here in Psalms 12. Prayer stands at the height of the world. Explains Reb Chaim of Volozhin, because every word of prayer or blessing or spiritual form of the word rises up to the heaven to achieve its effect in the heavenly place corresponding to it. By initiating this process, which builds and expands the celestial worlds and brings the universe closer to a state of perfection, the supplicant becomes a partner with God in the process of creation. Every word that we pray is kind of building a brick in making this world the home for God. This explains why it took no less than 120 elders of the Great Assembly, including several prophets, to formulate the Amidah, to formulate the Shemona Esrei prayer, the silent Amidah. Although relatively short, this prayer, the men of the Great Assembly, these were the people that came out of Babylon, out of Persia. After the Purim story, they came to rebuild the second temple in Jerusalem under the leadership of Ezra and Nehemiah and Mordechai and Esther and Zerubbabel. And they were the ones that formalized Judaism in the way that we know it. They created the Seder on Passover, the Siddur, which is the prayer book. It took 120 elders to do this. Why? Why did we need 120 elders to formulate the prayers of the Amidah? Although relatively short, this prayer had to be composed one word at a time, with a consideration for the particular heavenly realm each word is meant to build up. It was a task that required information available only to people privy to the secrets of creation and endowed with insight into the structure of the heavenly spheres. Since each word ascends heavenward to be transformed into new wings, new extensions of the spiritual worlds on high, the prayers in general are referred to as matters that stand at the height of the world. So somehow our prayers are building buildings, are making this world a home for God. And therefore the template of prayer is very precise, which is why it's very important to daven in Hebrew, by the way. Even though it's important to daven to understand the meaning of your prayers, which is very important to understand, and tefillah, prayer without intent, is nothing at all. Nevertheless, there still is a very important emphasis on the template of Hebrew prayer, because when you say it in Hebrew, it's like an email address, it's like a phone number that when entered correctly, that's when it reaches its desired destination. If you translate an email address into another language, it's probably not going to reach its destination, right? If you send rabbi@jewishgardens.com an email, but you do that in the Hebrew translation, rabbi@ganimyehudim.com, you're probably not going to reach me with your email address, right? You might understand what's going on, but if you want to reach me, you're going to have to do it in the template that I put together in the English language. And that's why you want to make sure to daven in the original template, because the original template is what is is what unlocks the code, is the key to open the door to let you in. In the view of the Baal Shem Tov, our Gemara addresses a commonly asked question about prayer. In times of emergency, there is often a great outpouring of prayer, earnest, sincere prayer, from countless Jews all over the world. Not always do these prayers bring about the desired outcome. People may wonder, where did all the prayers go? Were they even heard? Were they noticed? Did they go to waste? Were our tears shed in vain? Explains the Baal Shem Tov, based on our Gemara, emphatically, no, our tears and prayers were not wasted at all. Every prayer makes its mark in heaven, though the result may not be felt immediately here below. That's what it means in the Psalms of David, Krum Zulus Livnei Adam, that the prayers make a deep effect on high. If the salvation for which the prayer was offered must be denied, the prayer is held in reserve for another crisis at another time, when it will be answered in a way not envisioned by the supplicant. In reference to the intervening period, when the prayer is held in abeyance, then our Gemara characterizes prayer as something that stands at the height of the world. In other words, what it means that the prayer stands at the height of the world is that the prayer stays there. It stays sort of like pending, even though our prayer might not have been answered in the way that we wanted it to be answered, maybe because you weren't exhibiting trust in God properly, as we learned in the Gates of Trust. Maybe you asked without actual trust, which is a different level. Asking as opposed to being totally trusting. If you only prayed and the prayer was denied for whatever reason, the prayer was not wasted. It doesn't dissipate. It stays there waiting for it. That is, it lingers on high as Hashem waits for the appropriate time to answer it. And it is precisely because the prayer remains unfulfilled in heaven that people treat prayer with disrespect, for they wrongly view the delay as a sign that the prayer was ineffective. In the same vein, the Stipler Gaon writes that no prayer goes permanently unanswered. God might not answer now, he might answer in his own time. And that's something very critical to remember when it comes to prayer. That God's always got a plan, even though we might not understand it. And that God operates in God's time. God's time is totally different to our time. Thus, one who is praying for a certain outcome should never become discouraged by the impression that his prayers are not making any difference. Rather, he should keep on praying, and eventually you will see that his prayers had a dramatically positive effect. Okay, if you have any questions or comments, folks, a little quiet here in the comment chat rooms. Oh, maybe on YouTube is getting a little bit busier here now. So let's see, 1 second. I'm going to address your comments here on YouTube. Warren with Chainu, you can follow him. Very good. Julia, 64 doctors died in Italy. Maybe their mission was to be a doctor. However, all doctors had to die within 2 months. How does that benefit the patients? Now, Julia, I want to explain to you this way. Bear in mind that we cannot fathom the profundity of God. So we know that God has a plan. We know that we are not capable of comprehending that plan always, unless God allows us to understand it. Sometimes we can understand things in retrospect. If you look at your life, for example, and you think of the troubles that you went through on a personal level, this normally often works on a personal level much more than helping someone else. But if you think about it, it's the troubles that you went through that made you who you are today, right? So maybe in retrospect, in hindsight, you can understand why certain things had to happen. Maybe, if you're lucky. But for us to expect to be able to fathom why God is doing something is arrogant. It's unrealistic. Why should you be able to understand what the master of the universe is doing? We limited, puny creations. Why should we be able to fathom and understand what the master of the universe is understanding, or what his reason and his logic is? Do you see what I'm saying? You know what I mean? I can't understand what most of the people in my life are doing. Many people that I encounter, I can't understand what their rationale is. So why should I be able to understand the master of the universe? Yes, you've got a good question. I don't know the answer to your question. If I was God, I'd probably know the answer to your question. Without spirituality, the prayer, says Ron, without spirituality, the prayer would be naught and absolute nothingness. I'm not sure what your point is, though. Without spirituality, Ron, I'm not sure what you're connecting this to. I'm not sure if it's a question or a statement or a challenge, or I'm not sure. If you could be a little more specific, I'm sorry, I don't understand. So, Julia, I hope that I've been able to give some perspective, not an answer, because your question is effectively unanswerable. It was Moses, by the way, that asked of God, show me your face. To Julia, I say this. Moses asked of God, show me your face. And God tells him, you can't see my face, but you'll be able to see the back of me. Now, that's a little anthropomorphic because God doesn't have a back to his head. And the way I explain it is that when we want to understand God, to see God's face, to talk to you and understand you, God says you'll never be able to understand me. But you'll be able to see my back, which means hindsight, sometimes things will fall into perspective. The rear view mirror is much clearer than the front windscreen. But that's not always, right? So therefore, I say to you, Julia, when you're going through the crisis, hold on for dear life. Hold on and trust with every fiber of your being in the master of the universe that he knows what he's doing. And say, Father, I know that you're protecting us. I know that you're watching over us. I know that you've got a plan. I know that this is going to be good. I know that it's hidden good. I know that it's not evil. I don't understand, but I know and I trust. And that's the attitude which we're supposed to adopt over here. And with that, I think I'm going to move on over here. If there's any other questions, folks, Harvey, is it more important to pray in Hebrew than in English? When you understand the English, but not all the Hebrew. Okay, great question. Is it more important to pray in Hebrew than in English? When you understand the English, but not all the Hebrew. So I think, Harvey, that it's important to do both. It's really important to do both. On the one hand, it's going to be more meaningful to you when you pray in English. But it's going to be more effective when you pray in Hebrew. And you want to have a balance of both of those. So that's why what I'm doing now in this next course, and in just a few moments, I'm about to start the prayer course, as you're moving on to explain how you can understand the Hebrew, so that the Hebrew actually becomes more meaningful to you and something that you can relate to and understand. That's my goal in the prayer course. And if you've missed the prayer course so far, I encourage you to go to youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. That's youtube.com/Jewish Gardens. Go to the top of the page where you'll see playlists and click on Introduction to Jewish Spirituality and Meditation Through Prayer. You'll see all of my past classes on this course, and you'll be able to review those classes to be able to come to a very strong familiarity, a very strong rapport with one prayer, which we're about to finish today. And when you finish that prayer, you'll be able to say, hey, I understand this in Hebrew, even though I didn't grow up as a rabbi's son like I did. You can still become very familiar with the Hebrew language. It's not Chinese. This is not rocket science. It's just Hebrew. It's really not difficult. We've learned 15 words so far that you can become intimately familiar with. That every time you see them, you actually understand them. And instead of thinking this is some language from a foreign planet, you can say, this is Hebrew. I'm a Jew. And I get it. I understand these 15 words. These are words that I understand. So that's the answer to your question, Harvey. I encourage you to evolve your learning so that you not only are able to understand the prayers in English, but you can understand them in Hebrew too, and you get the benefits of both worlds. I hope that answers your question. Mickey, but since Hashem created all languages, he clearly understands all languages in our prayers in English, etc. Absolutely, Hashem understands them for sure. But the thing is that Hebrew is the holy tongue. Hebrew is the holy tongue, and it's a lot like how we communicate. So let me explain to you, for example. So I speak 4 languages. Hannah speaks about 7 languages, right? If I say to you something, if I convey a message to you, and there is a double meaning intended, for example, when you translate that to another language, you know that that double meaning is going out the window, right? So the depth of the prayer, the depth of the wisdom, the depth of the idea being conveyed in one language cannot be conveyed in another language. Hebrew is very, very, very expressive when it comes to that kind of stuff, to multiple layers of interpretation. Why? Because it's a language created by God, as opposed to the other languages, which are languages that were created by people. Bear in mind that the other languages are arbitrary. Hebrew is the language of divine communication. I'm sure you understand, Mickey, that there is much greater depth in coding in the Hebrew language that is incomparable to any other language. Hence, it's called the Holy Tongue. So when you read in Hebrew, when you speak in Hebrew, when you daven in Hebrew, you're drawing down the blessing. Imagine we had to read Torah in English. Imagine you wrote the Torah scroll in English. You translated the Torah scroll and you wrote it in English. Do you think it would have the same holiness as a Torah scroll in the original Hebrew? I don't think so. Nowhere near. Why? Because yes, it is the Torah explained, but it's not the same holiness. You know, Torah is compared to water, because just like water flows from a high place to a low place, so too Torah is godly wisdom that goes straight from God down to us in this very lowly world. And it's the same wisdom. And yes, when we understand that, we are capturing godly wisdom. So whether you're learning a Talmud in English, or you're learning a Talmud in Chinese, or in Hebrew, you're still learning the same godly wisdom, and that's true. However, when you communicate in the holy tongue, you're able to pick the locks. In the language of the Code of Jewish Law, it says that the angels bring all prayers before God, but Hebrew goes directly to God. The angels, I think what does it say? That they don't speak Aramaic, or they have a trouble transmitting other languages to God. When you speak Hebrew, it goes straight up to God. The other languages, they got to go through all sorts of embassies and stations along the way before they actually reach it up to God. Anyways, so I hope that answers your question.